Okay guys, in this video we are going to solve radical equations. This is the fourth time I've done this video, so hopefully I will get it right this time. So some of this you'll see already worked out just because I've done it so many times. But a radical equation, the definition of a radical equation, so go over to your vocabulary page. A radical equation is an equation that involves one or more radicals. An equation that involves one or more radicals. So this symbol is a radical. Sometimes we call it the square root sign, but it's technically called a radical because it could have different roots in here. And then an extraneous solution. We want to go ahead and write down this definition for now. An extraneous solution, look at the word. Extraneous, I don't know enough Latin to know what the neus part means, but this is extra. So this is an extra solution. Okay, an extra solution. So it's a solution created by squaring an equation that is not a true solution. So if you think about what happens when you square an x, you had 1x and you square it and you got 2. So you're adding in a solution. And sometimes you get one that is not true. So you have to check them. Sometimes none of them will work. Sometimes both of them will work. But a lot of times one works and one doesn't. So that's what an extraneous solution is. Now, we're going to take our note sheet and it's like the other one that we were doing. Okay, here's one. It's long. You're going to fold it in half and cut it here and cut it here so that you have a sheet that will fit in your book. And we're going to glue this to page 72 when we glue it down. So I did mine just like the last one that we did. I folded it, trimmed the top and bottom, make sure it's going to fit. I folded it in half, and then I folded me a flap down through here. And then run you a bead of glue and glue that down, and then that way you'll be able to open it and have extra room back here. Now for today's video, the reason I'm doing this today is because I'm not at school for you for this lesson. So when I come back, if you still have questions or we need to do more examples, this will give us some room to do that. So let's get started. Radical equation. To solve one, I have the steps here typed up. To solve a radical equation, one, you're going to isolate the radical, which means to move everything outside of the radical to the other side of the equation. Okay, so move everything that's outside of the radical to the other side of the equation. Then we're going to square each side, write it in general form, which means to set it equal to 0, solve it. Usually these end up being factored. If there's still a radical, repeat. We'll do an example with that one, and then always check your solution. So if I know I talk faster than you can write, so you may want to pause it and write all of that down, and then we'll get started solving the equations here. Okay, so the radical equation, first example here. I don't know how much you can hear, but I'm at my house outside, and I can hear dogs barking and crickets chirping, so I hope you can hear me. Okay, this problem, we have the square root of 2x plus 7 minus x equals 2. So that first step told us to isolate the radical. So that means that this part we want by itself. So to get it by itself, we have to move that minus x. So to get rid of that minus x, we're going to add x. So we add x to the other side. And cancels here. So we have the square root of 2x plus 7. That is a really loud something up there in that tree. Equals 2 plus x. But I'm going to write it x plus 2. Then we're going to square both sides. Remember that a square and a square root just simply cancel each other out. So you get what's left underneath there is what you have. So we have 2x plus 7 here. Over here, we've got to take x plus 2 and we're going to square it. So let's talk about that for a minute. If we square the x plus 2, that really means that we have x plus 2 and we're doing it twice. So we square the first one and then we FOIL. Keep foiling. So you've got x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4, which is x squared plus 4x plus 4. So let's make this our little think bubble. This is what you do. Another way to do that is just to use the rule and have x plus 2 squared. You square the first one, so you've got x squared. Multiply these together and double it. So 2x squared is 4x. And then square the last one and you get 4. So that is what we have here. Now, the next step was to put it in general form, which means to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 2x here and subtract 7 here. Now the reason I moved these over, I want this x squared is positive and I like it being positive. So I'm going to move it that way. 4x minus 2x is plus 2x. 4 minus 7 is negative 3. So I have x squared plus 2x minus 3. Then it says to solve it. Generally, this will be factoring. If you don't end up with an x squared, if there were no x over here, and there wasn't an x squared, it'd be a really easy thing to do. If you've got something here you can't factor, you would have to do the quadratic formula. So whatever you have to do to solve it. This one factors fairly easily into x plus 3 times x minus 1. And then keep going to solve. Set each one of those equal to 0. So that means x equals negative 3. And x equals 1. So we want to take those two equations, or two solutions, and put it up into the equation and see if they work. Now, this is from one of the many times that I've done this video, already worked it out. So if we tried negative 3, we plug it in where there's an x, and we end up with 4 equals 2. Well, that's not true. 4 does not equal 2, so that's not a solution. If we try 1 and we plug it in, we get 2 equals 2. That is true. So x equals 1 is our solution. Okay? This little thing, one of the other times I did this, I thought about, sometimes people always want to know, well, why don't we have a plus or minus here? Why don't we have a plus or minus here? So you have a plus or minus only if you have an equation and you take the square root. So like if we have this as our equation and we take the square root of both sides, when we do that, that's when we add in the plus minus. If we're just doing this and it's already a radical there, we're only doing the positive one of that. Okay? So that's the checking. Make sure you always check them. So from that, this one didn't work and this one did. Okay? Now, the next one is a more complicated one. So what I want you to do is pause the video, try the checkpoint, and then we'll come back and then we'll do the hard one. Okay, so hopefully you've paused and worked it out now. So here's our answer. We get negative 9 and 4, and 4 doesn't work, and negative 9 does. So if you've got that right, you can just fast forward a little bit. Otherwise, if we go back, oh, this, I should have told you this before I had you pause. So I hope you didn't listen to me and that you didn't pause. This should have been an X. This should have been an X. And I didn't fix your papers, so I hope that you all figure this out before it's too late. Making that an X, then you subtract 2 to move it over. And then you've got to get rid of this negative, so we multiply both sides by negative 1. Okay? And then you keep going, and that's what happens. Okay? Now, just in case, if you're still listening, you probably needed to know more. So we're going to square the square root, and it goes away, so you have 40 minus 9x. When you square this, negative x squared is negative x squared is positive x squared. If you multiply these together, you get negative 2x, and double it because of the outer inner, you get negative 4x, and then square the 4, or the 2, and you get 4. And then you have to subtract 30 over here, add 9x here, so we get x squared plus 5x minus 36. And then you got to multiply to negative 36 and add to 5. So that would be 9 and negative 4. So this is where, if you needed to, you can make you a little table and try to figure out, well, what can I multiply to get 36? And if you needed to, you could just keep going till you figured everything out, and just know one of them has to be positive and one has to be negative to get that negative. So you're finding the one that has a difference of 5, which would be the 9 and 4. And since you want the 5 to be positive, 9 is positive and 4 is negative. Okay? Now, if you happen to have not done that, like if you kept going, if you didn't pause and you kept going with that as a 2, if that were a 2, just so you know if you were right or not, if that were a 2 and you subtracted 2, you would have 0. So that makes the problem really easy. And then that negative, if you multiply by negative 1, makes that positive, and the 0 is still 0. And then if you square both sides, 40 minus 9x equals 0. So 40 equals 9x. So x equals 40 over 9. So if you paused a minute ago and actually worked that out, that way that you might have come up with that answer. Okay? Now, I've got just a few minutes to do this complicated one. And this is where I got to last time before my video stopped because my iPad died. But we move this over, so it's a negative, so when we move it over we get a plus. So we've got the square root of 2x minus 5 equals 1 plus the square root of x minus 3. So then, when we square both sides, this is what we have. So you've got 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times the square root of x minus 3 is the square root of x minus 3. 1 times the square root of x minus 3 is the square root of x minus 3. Again, I have 2 of those, so this becomes 2 times the square root of x minus 3. And then on the end, the square root of x minus 3 times the square root of x minus 3 is just x minus 3. Those square roots go away. Okay, so you might want to pause and ponder all of that and let it soak in. Now we're going to combine like terms and get this by itself. So I'm going to do this fairly quickly because I'm running out of time. 2x minus x is x. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Negative 5 plus 2 would be negative 3 equals 2 square root of x minus 3. Then if I divide by 2, I have 1/2 x minus 3/2 equals the square root of x minus 3. Okay, so then we have to square both sides. I was kind of trying to make sure in my head I hadn't messed up since I ended up with all those fractions. So x minus 3 here is the easy one. Over here, when we square this, I'm going to get 1/4 x squared minus 3x plus 9/4. Then we're going to make it equal 0, so I've got, well, let's do this. To get rid of these 4s, let's just multiply both sides by 4, and that'll get rid of our fractions for us. I like that better. And we have x squared minus 12x plus 9 equals 4x minus 12. So then that gives us x squared. If I move the 4 over, I get negative 16x. Add 12 plus 21 equals 0. Now at this point, this won't factor, so we're going to have to do the quadratic formula, and I don't have enough time to do that because my video is going to stop. So figure that out using the quadratic formula, and then when I get back, we'll make sure we've got the right answer on that. Okay? And oh,